Hey, good evening. Part two. We are Jott-Nyx Paranormal. This is the Paranormal Lens. I'm David. I'm joined tonight by, as usual, Jamie and Chad. Say hello, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Hello, gentlemen.
And from week to week on a Tuesday night, we get together and we discuss many different topics across the paranormal spectrum. You know, we've covered everything from water cryptids like Ogopogo to voodoo to dust and/or orbs. And
maybe.
We have all maybe. And we've covered a number of places like the Conjuring House. We had the Clifton Theater. We had our evidence review after the Clifton Theater investigation. So, you know, we cover a wide range of topics, and we're expanding that range again tonight with a very unique topic that I've enjoyed for quite some time, and that's the phenomenon of black-eyed children. So. It sounds exactly it sounds exactly what it is. It is what it is. So the black-eyed children phenomena dates back into the 80s and into the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a writer in Texas that is really considered the origin of this phenomenon. And his name was Brian Bethel. And the thing about Brian's experience that he recounts about running into these children is the fact that he doesn't want to, like, he kind of, it feels like he kind of doesn't want the notoriety for it. Like, he doesn't want to keep reliving it. He doesn't want to keep, you know, like he doesn't want to keep mining the same field, or, you know, plowing the same fields. So there's the black-eyed children are what they describe. They're smallish, from about like this right here. This is a good example right here. This is one of the pictures, an artist's impression of what the black-eyed children are. They're always described as having pale or palish skin, or oddly colored skin, and these black, almost like a cheap ghoul on a Saturday night horror movie type of eyes, and like the almost like a doll's eyes or shark's eyes, you know. And Brian Bethel recounts his experience with them, and it occurred in a parking lot, believe it or not. Outside of a movie theater and one of Texas's early internet service providers, and he was sitting in his car. He was writing a check to. It was late night, later in the evening. He was writing a check, and heard a knock on his car window, and there were two children, about 10 to 12, maybe 13 years old. Outside, and he recounts their voices being very, almost, I don't want to say robotic, but maybe canned, like you're dealing with a robocaller, you know, when you call the bank, you know, like one of those automated systems where they have kind of speak from a script. And through the window, he was talking to them, and they were asking him if they could have a ride. They wanted to go home, and they wanted to get money from their mom to come back and see the Mortal Kombat movie. And he says, he was compelled to like open the door and let them in because, as an adult, and you guys have kids, I don't, but you guys do, but you want to help a child, right? Like it's a child that's in some kind of need. As an adult, you're kind of compelled to help, and it just finally he didn't feel right about it, and then he started kind of he wanted to open the door, and he said that he felt almost as if there was a force compelling him to want to open the door, but then he started asking questions. He started, he started coming to the realization that by the time they took him to, or by the time he took them to wherever they needed to go and got back, that the last Mortal Kombat show would have already started and would have been well into the show. And then one of the peculiar things that the kid out front had said was that, come on, come on, mister, let us in. We can't come in until you invite us in. And, he just freaked out, pulled away from them, and then looked back into his rear view, and they were gone. So it gives you very much like a vampire feel. It gives you very much kind of a ghouly, ghosty type feel. And he swears, that this is true, that it's his, his experience is legitimate. There were a couple of other people that came forward with experiences. There was a prison guard that came, and he was at home alone, and got the knock on his front door. Very much the same thing. Hey, mister, can we come in? There was, there was. I forget the specifics of that story, but like he was a prison guard. He was somebody who dealt with violent offenders on a regular basis, and he felt compelled to beyond not leaving these children in, who had that same kind of robotic, we can't come in until you invite us in, let us in, mister, to go upstairs and retrieve his sidearm and come back, and was willing to confront whatever he thought was out there, and they were gone by the time he came back. And then the final really in-depth story that I had found was a mother and a son, and her young son had stopped on the way home for milk at like a quick stop, and she left the young child in the back seat while she ran in for a second. When she came out, she noticed that there was a second individual sitting in the back seat with her son, and like kind of too close to the son, like uncomfortably close. And she, got in, and it was a child sitting in there with her son. And there was a bit of an exchange, but she just felt so off-putting to the point where her fight or flight instinct kicked in, and she got out of the vehicle, snatched her son out, and went back inside to the clerk and told the clerk what was going on, what was happening. And the clerk went outside, and the clerk was unable to find anything other than an empty vehicle still running. So she called her husband, and her husband came back and, came down there and got them. And she didn't feel comfortable driving her vehicle back. She went to drive the husband's truck back, and the husband was to drive that vehicle back. Well, she got in her husband's vehicle with their son and drove back, and it was fine. When the husband got into the vehicle to drive back, he said he was driving it for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden this stink, like somebody had let dirty diapers sit in the sun, or rotten meat was somewhere in this vehicle. So he pulled over, he searched the vehicle, and couldn't find the source of this smell, of this stank. And they got back, and believe it or not, this is one of the stories that shows like the lingering effects of coming into contact with, reportedly coming into contact with these black-eyed children, where the PTSD symptoms are experienced, where people don't want to relive this, they don't want to keep going through this, and also you have symptoms of what when I look at the symptoms that I describe, I see like radiation sickness or, some kind of type of flu. Like the son in that last story experienced flu-like symptoms for a couple of weeks and then measles-like symptoms for after that, but they could never find anything wrong with him. And then all of a sudden he just woke up one day and he was fine. And there were no lingering effects. So there are stories about black-eyed children that run across the gamut of the paranormal. You have those that want to explain it away as kind of like that Men in Black alien extraterrestrial explanation where these children are hybrids of extraterrestrials and humans, and that's where you get the black eyes from. You have those that want to believe that these are much akin to like the hungry ghosts in Japanese folklore, where they're constantly looking to eat and they're constantly looking to feed on something, and they're tortured and they want to torture the living as well. And it's a phenomena that has since expanded. I don't want to use the word exploded, but it has felt seen an expansion because a lot of these stories are from the infancy of the internet, even prior to the internet. I think Brian's story, his experience happened in 1996, reportedly. So that's the infancy of the internet. I was in college. That's the infancy of the internet. And it was originally shared on, he describes it as it was like on a message board back in the day. If you remember what the old, the chat rooms and stuff like that didn't exist. You had to post on virtual bulletin boards, basically, for all three of us as we sit here with gray in our beards and gray in our hair. We remember the infancy of the internet and how this all began back when Al Gore invented the internet. But he shared this on an email list, and it got out, and it kind of got a life of its own, and it becomes a part of the culture of the paranormal. Like, it becomes one of those things that you hear about. It becomes, what we all experienced. And Jerry, I don't know, you get I don't believe that there is enough information to determine whether or not these things are inherently evil. Now, everybody that I've seen interviewed and everybody that I've seen, do some kind of analysis on it feels as if they have a very vampire vibe to them. Feels as if that they are a kind of predatory and taking advantage of, that inherent that inherent need for people to want to help children in general. And it's what their intentions are once they're in. I don't know, because I haven't seen a story where somebody has let them in. So who knows what happens once you let them in? It very, very much gives me the feeling. Have you seen the movie Let the Right One In? Or Let Me In? Let the Right One In was the Swedish movie, the original Swedish movie, and Let Me In was the American version of it with the little girl vampire. So again, you get explanations for this across the gamut of the paranormal, from vampires and ghosts and ghouls up to and including aliens and alien hybrid kids. So that brings me to where where the culture intersects with this, and our the second portion of it. And black-eyed kids have become part of the creepypasta phenomenon throughout the internet. Reddit has a subreddit, creepypasta. You also, if you've ever had the opportunity to read the No Sleep Reddit subreddit, that's all fantastical stories, paranormal stories that are all presented as true, but you don't know how much of it is, how much of it isn't, whether or not they are just as a whole, or whether they're just at works of fiction. But when it comes to creepypastas, that has become an incredible phenomenon to watch from having the historical perspective of seeing the internet do its thing for the last 25 or 30 years. You run into stories and things that take on a life of their own. What's on the screen right now is a picture that has always been associated with one of the most famous creepypastas, the Russian sleep experiment. So I can remember the Russian sleep experiment became a thing in about 2010. And again, this is how this stuff takes on a life of its own. It was about 5 Russian prisoners during World War II that were sealed in a chamber to be kept awake for 30 days with this stimulant gas. And if they survived the 30 days, they would win their freedom. And then there's a very gory story that follows about what happened to them, how they went crazy, how one screamed until he blew his vocal cords out, how they conducted, self-mutilation, and one died, and they opened the chamber up, and they didn't want to, they didn't want to be taken away from the stimulant, and it became a big thing, and everybody thought it was real. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, this is terrible." Look at what's happening. This is incredibly interesting, and it turns out that what we're looking at right here, this creature in front of us, is actually a black and white, grainy photo of a spirit Halloween animatronic that was used for this. It has nothing to do with anything. The story is completely fabricated, but people have taken it and run with it. What's the next picture we got there, Chad? Everybody's got to know who this is. You guys familiar?
It's Steve, right?
This is Slender Man. Steve, yeah.
Steve,
also known as Slender Man. Slender Man is reportedly, again, if you believe the lore that has been created, yes, Amanda, it's Slender Man. The lore that's created, he abducts children. He's literally a creation of the internet. Now, the origin of Slender Man has nothing to do with fact. Slender Man was part of a design project in either the late 90s or the early 2000s to take ordinary pictures and make them creepy. And one gentleman created this figure that you see, not this particular one, but created the long, lanky, black with the featureless face creation that you see and that we've come to know as Slender Man. Again, Slender Man has no basis in fact. Slender Man has no basis in lore. The lore that's been created has been created since his inception in the late 90s, early 2000s. However, the obsession with Slender Man has gone from just writing stories about him to, in 2014, to a 13 and a 14-year-old girl, I believe, in Wisconsin lured a 13-year-old friend out into the woods and murdered her, like brutally stabbed her to death, in the hopes that, right, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Amanda, in the hopes that it would catch Slender Man's attention. And he's just a figment of somebody's imagination. But you see how these things can take a foothold and can take, and can create their own, their own lore. Is there another one in there? Because I think I just had some random ones in there. This was just a random water. I wanted to try to find a deep sea cryptid. I know there's one from Japan. I just couldn't think of what it was off the top of my head. But, for obvious reasons, we're going to punt on the deep sea obsession for this week. So next slide.
Too soon.
And this right here is Jeff the Killer. Too soon. This right here is Jeff the Killer. Jeff the Killer is another, again, has a lore, a folklore and a story all of his own, spawned a movie, spawned a lot of other stuff, but video games. I think he has a video game. I know Slender Man has a video game. Slender Man, had a movie made, a big budget Paramount released movie. Utilizing his likeness. I think it was Paramount. But this is Jeff the Killer. Jeff the Killer is another one of the ones. But a very simple backstory about a kid being bullied. He gets burned, and his face is deformed and he goes crazy when they take the bandages off. But this is very much like a the Twilight Zone episode that it sounds like. You can see where the origins come from. And I say all this because we've experienced. I don't want to make it seem like the internet has invented this. We've experienced this phenomena our entire lives. We've heard urban legends. The call is coming from inside the house. But it's kind of morphed a little bit from a lot of those urban legends that we've heard as kids and as on up, and like that has been passed around. They were really more morality, or they had some kind of a lesson attached to them. The call is coming from inside the house. You should keep an eye on the kids and not be screwing around with your boyfriend when you're when you're babysitting, or there's always the moral about when the horror movies when we were younger about premarital sex and underage drinking and stuff like that. These creepypastas of today, they don't really have that. They're just kind of horrific just for the sake of being horrific. And that's the evolution that I wanted to point out. Urban legends, even like cryptids from when we were referencing some of our other discussions, would have been easy for them to, for someone to create. Pardon me. Would have been easier for someone to create a cryptid or a mysterious animal or an evil being to keep somebody out of a particular area, very Scooby-Doo-ish, and it's where you see this sociological breakdown or involvement in all of this. And I say that because I've written numerous papers on like online indoctrination and stuff like that, to where you see the effect of the internet. Back in the day when we were growing up, societal norms were kind of adhered to and, enforced by, inclusion. So you grew up in a small town like I did. A lot of times you ended up with I don't want to say a weirdo, because I don't want to cast asparagus, but you've got the strange guy that lived by himself out on the edge of town, who only came in to get food, and he was wearing a tinfoil hat and carrying a ball-peen hammer in his pocket because aliens were reading his thoughts and they were coming to visit his cows. Well, back in the day, you kind of exerted a little societal pressure on him to conform by, hey, we're not going to have nothing to do with you until you start acting right, However, as I bring it back to the internet and the creepypastas and everything else, there's a community for everything now. Like the global community that the internet provides is a dual-edged sword, where there is a community for everything. If you want to challenge that fact, just look up the name Armand Muez and read his story and find out what kind of community he found. But like nowadays, that guy that lives on the edge of town, he's no longer, there's no incentive for him to come into and conform to societal norms, because now he's having parties with people from all across the country that have flown in and are wearing their own tinfoil hats and maybe have brought their own cattle for the aliens to come visit. And you have these people who are willing to.
Right. And it's not the chat board anymore. It's you're doing the same thing.
We're doing this instead. Yeah. They don't have to fly in. They can be here with us in this format.
Right.
And you can be anywhere in the world at that point. It's amazing how we've changed over 25 years.
Right. I mean, you could be in Cincinnati and I could be in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, and we're having a discussion about, black-eyed kids.
Well,
so,
that's.
But I mean, it's, and you have people that are willing.
I was gonna say that's.
Go ahead.
We talk about the strangeness. Those people, the fringe on the edge of town guy, or whomever it is, because we all know that story and we all probably know that person. That what we do is considered strange to many people. People who know us very dearly.
Oh yeah.
Don't understand why we go around and talk to to ourselves in the dark a couple nights a week, a couple times a month, whatever it is. They can't wrap their heads around why we would want to even try to do this, and all the things that it comes with it. I know we're laughing at this, but it's hard to justify it to those who don't understand it. And I don't justify is probably the wrong word, but try to relate it to people who don't understand it because they don't want to, and they don't see it the way we see it. The curiosity, the passion, all the stuff that comes with it. But without some connection, we wouldn't have the access to get to this point. What we do and how we've come together. And the willingness of that to be coming from the shadows to the front. In some brighter light than a shadow anyway. I wouldn't say it's in mainstream yet, but I think it kind of is based on all the programming and access points there are now. It's really interesting. Even our world has come out of that forward, being a fringe thing. It's interesting.
Right. And it's funny you say that, because I've literally had the conversation, being middle-aged and single. And so you're meeting people, and I've had the conversation with people, with women I've wanted to get to know better or whatever. But I've literally had the conversation where it's been, so what's with the ghost? What's with the ghost thing? What makes you do that? What makes you want to go do that? And you end up having to kind of justify it or not justify it, but explain it away. So. What does Jimmy have to say, or Jerry have to say? They're drawn to me, and I have no clue whether heard the black-eyed kid, but never came across any. Yeah, because on this topic, without getting too far ahead of myself, we're already 28 minutes in. On this topic, I feel as if, I'm not a big believer in them. I live by myself out in the country. I'd love for one to come up and knock on my door. But
just don't
I honestly think that this was something, right? Yeah. Don't get the Ouija. If he's standing there holding a Ouija board, that's it. Or just, it's a home defense system engaged immediately. But I'm not personally a big believer. I just found it more interesting to look at it, at what makes us want to believe these creepypastas and, the what it would take for somebody to act like those girls did in Wisconsin, when it came to Slender Man. And I guess, between 2016 and now, it would be, you could associate this type of behavior, this type of mentality with the same thing that you would have in regard to like the fake news phenomenon that we had for quite some time. Where people want to believe something, want to believe X, Y, or Z, and they look for reasons to do it, even if the every bit of evidence contradicts it. But if a shred of it just seems plausible, then you have people that really want to. And that was kind of just like, I apparently have something landing on my lawn.
It's like
that's what I wanted. Yeah. Well, they came in the jet instead of just appearing on my front porch. But what do you guys think? I mean, I've spoken for about 30 minutes.
I'm sort of with you on this one. I don't put much faith into this other than the internet making stories like this grow quickly. I really don't feel like the stories that are out there there doesn't seem to be much meat on them. I know, Jamie, the one group that you listen to a lot that does their podcast did a story on the same thing, and I listened to that story, and I don't put much faith into it. I would say.
Yeah, so remind me of the dates of the initial story. What was that? 86?
96 or 98, somewhere in there, I believe.
In the 90s. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 96, 98, the one in Texas by Bethel.
Okay. So, I'm hearing this, and oh man, I'm just gonna say it. I'm hearing the plot of an X-Files episode. Yeah. And I know there was a plot line where like the alien DNA got injected and people and their eyes went black right away, like that kind of stuff. And then, I forget where I was. I think it was in college, and a professor that it was a psych class, and like the prospect of telling a believable story that you believe, and it was make it be something that is so fantastic that it doesn't seem plausible to be a lie or an untruth, and a dude sitting in a movie theater parking lot on a Friday night writing a check. What? Like, how's that start the story? Like, what? I want to know why the guy was there, what he was writing the check for. It just takes me somewhere else, and not really. I don't want to question that anymore. Like, okay, I can get that because that's what people do. And I'm gonna say this to try to be funny about it, but it takes me to a scene from the movie Step Brothers where Will Ferrell's character pulls out a samurai sword because it has a signature on it of Randy Jackson. And he's like, it's all I had with me. And you can't not get his autograph. It's like, it's so like, what the hell did I just hear? Okay. Go on with it. And that kind of like how this started for me. I'm like, this can't be a story because it's so like, what the heck? But then the plausibility comes in because, as paranormal investigators, the first thing we want to do is figure out what it could be. So you have to start with something, which is the story. And then you kind of take it from there, the belief, whatever that is. And as we go forward, that's the foundation. So, okay, where could it go from here? The plausibility. Okay, there could be children there. Yes, it's a parking lot. It's a public place. There could be kids there, and therefore they could be lost, and therefore, or they could need something, and their reaction is to go to an adult. Okay, I get it. You hit it well. People with kids are sympathetic to them, or people in general are sympathetic to kids. So maybe, and then the oddness of the topic that they bring to him and how they present it makes him question it. Like, I think rationality kicks in at that point. So maybe this is plausible, but maybe he was watching a lot of X-Files and, got a little, maybe he was tired that night, or who knows what influence he might be under, sitting in a parking lot by himself in a car writing a check at some hour of the evening. It's just, I'm not questioning this dude. I'm sure he's a straight up guy, but there's so many holes here already for me that it takes me to an urban myth, and therefore it takes me to not necessarily trusting it to be a fact. Like we talked about last episode, about Bell Witch, how it's exploded over the years to be this bigger thing than probably what it really ever was at the time. And, it's now become folklore. It's such a bigger thing, and I think, and that's 200 years of history there of a tale being told and spun. This is 20 years. So, but how fast things have exploded because of access to the internet and technology and all the things that we never had before. It's just amazing to me how far along we can get, how information can fly, and whisper down the lane is so much faster now than it could have been if it was just truly word of mouth before. So I think it's a fantastical,
right.
It's a cool story, and it's a cool thing, and it'd be cool if it were something, but and maybe there's no, and I think the question was asked, one of the guests earlier, about the reality of what if, well, maybe it is true and someone's let them in and they didn't survive, and that's why there's no tale to tell after the fact. Maybe, right? But I really think it's a lot of hooey. Not a thing. Great story. Cool.
Right. Amanda, I was about to mention the Blair Witch. When it came to the, again, something that we remember is that was the very first, the Blair Witch Project was that very first piece of viral marketing that really utilized this, utilized the internet when it came to getting really it got the word out, because it just put out this story that was fantastical, that was scary, and it was your very first found footage horror movie, and nobody had ever experienced the marketing campaign that they were about to experience. And I'll be honest, I got caught up in it. I went and camped out in Burkittsville, Maryland, before I knew whether or not the Blair Witch was fake. So, but I had my tent and my flashlight, and I was ready to go. But like that just showed that that people were susceptible to large numbers of people believing something. Like I think Jerry said something earlier in the comments about if enough people believe it, you can manifest it, and that's what that was. That's obviously they didn't manifest the Blair Witch, but like you manifested a phenomenon. Enough people believed it. You manifested a phenomenon where people were selling stick figures and rocks from Burkittsville, Maryland, like on eBay. Like, what it takes to ship a rock? So
that's how big the rock is.
and Tammy,
right? Well, that's a line from the lesser known Blair Witch 2.
Yeah, and Tammy commented that definitely the internet has a big influence on all this stuff. It's just changed so much of folklore and all these stories. They just take off so much quicker.
Yeah, that's really what's allowed, like, everything.
Right. Well, the internet
to take off. Instant gratification, instant access, and you can blow up things so quickly now that we would have taken forever to do before. Dave, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the internet is a culture of its own, and it is an entity of its own that, really. The computer age. Let's go back to the computer age. The leaps forward that we've made in technology over the last 30 years are more than we've made in the 50,000 years prior. And the internet has provided its own spirituality, its own set of basically gods and monsters, as we can see, gods and monsters, and it's a world that we've developed on our own and without being overly dramatic, at our own peril, because we have so many examples of how a lot of this stuff can get out of hand and out of control, and we just see it continue to happen again and again and again because we've kind of opened Pandora's box and we can't get it shut again. And we'll never be able to get it shut again because the internet's not going anywhere. Regardless of what my friends who refuse to use the internet say, they're not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, Paranormal Activity, another big phenomenon. That was now you're getting into the found footage movies. Like those were, because people want to believe. People want to believe. That's the underlying thing in all of these creepypastas and all of this other stuff, is that people want to believe in something. And, like us, we want to believe, in the paranormal. We want to believe in, we want to believe that we're sitting there talking to Alois Booby on a Saturday night.
Right.
We want to believe that we're talking to something on the other side.
Yep.
And it doesn't make our belief any more valid than anybody else's. I had a discussion. We had a rather contentious discussion with a religious leader on this matter because he insisted that his authority and his power to deal with demons and such came because the Catholic Church and all of its members, what's the phrase I'm looking for? All the Catholic Church and all of its members, bestowed that power on him because they all believe. And my response was, just because your imaginary friend has more believers than my imaginary friend doesn't make your imaginary friend any more real.
Right.
And people want to believe. That's what it comes down to. And when it comes to these creepypastas and when it comes to these phenomena like black-eyed children, like I've legitimately met adults that believe Slender Man is real.
Sure.
It's
not on the internet. It's real if it's on the internet. It's a fact.
Right. Oh man, the internet. That's why I went to Burkittsville, Maryland, man. The internet wasn't going to lie to me. Those folks disappeared.
They're somewhere.
I'm going to go try to get me some of that. Some of that rust in Powerhouse, or, Yes, Tammy. I've met adults that believe in Slender Man. I've met adults that believe. It's amazing. But, again, it's not a commentary on the validity of belief or anything like that. It's just pointing out that people want to believe, and if you put it out there and you sell it, with absolute conviction, much like people have sold the black-eyed children stories. If you have the absolute conviction, you're gonna and then you get into personality types. Your strong A-type personality is going to influence the follower, the B-type, and so on personalities into falling behind them. So, but yeah, a little bit different conversation tonight.
Mm-hmm. A good one.
Yeah. But one that does, one that does pertain.
I think the key thing here is that we want to believe in something, and here's the important part. We want to believe in something, but we have to take the evidence, the information, call it that, and that's presented, but not just take the one source. And this is true for all kinds of things. Obviously current events, all the way through paranormal stuff. I mean, everything in our lives. We're if we're only ever given one source of information and we take it to be facts, we could be wrong. And the analytical mind will look for another source or other sources, as many as they can find, and not just believe the one thing that's presented. And we tend to, and I'll go back to the day, back in the day, when we had 3 networks that were providing news. We had the Tom Brokaws of the world, the Walter Cronkites, the Dan Rathers, those kind of guys. If they said it on the evening news, it was a fact and it was a truth. And, and I grew up believing that because that's what my parents taught me to believe, because they trusted those sources, and now the source stream is so wide and so interested in what they want you to know versus what the facts are. And I'm getting deep here, and I'm trying not to drown in it, but we have to realize that there is more information available, and we're allowed to source more than just that one thing. And I think that's where we fall flat, because time is limited. The how to access the information is limited, and where to go with it, how to get it and all that stuff is restricted, by some of the access points that we actually have. But it's still incumbent on us as individuals to figure out the full fact range before we can push it forward to someone else. And I think that's where we fall a lot, and I'm guilty too. I'm limited on my time sometimes to dig into things, but I don't take everything I hear as a fact either. It's an opinion, and that's a different way of looking at it for me. But we go there too often, and the belief of a Slender Man, or any other urban legend, it used to be believed if you said Candyman 3 times into the mirror, he was going to appear, and that used to be a thing to scare kids, campfire stories, were before the internet. That's how we scared the bejesus out of each other, the bloody hook and all that stuff. Those, you had a choice right there, right, to believe or not believe, and many believed, and probably still do, because that's just the path they took. Bloody Mary, thank you. It's just one of those things where we have to be objective and not take it all as a true fact, because sometimes it's just not going to be, especially in the modern era.
It's funny. I think both you guys know that I spent a week in Williamsburg last week, and some of the interpreters actually brought this up as, in today's day and age, in the 2000s, 2020, whatever, you have all these different sources. Back then they had one source, and people still strive to find more information.
Right.
And sometimes we do now. So it's interesting that, even back in, the 1700s, people were striving to find information, and it was a lot more difficult for them to do it, but they still were trying to do it. And, it's up to us with all the sources of information to try to weed out what's not real and what is real. And it's definitely, it was very thoughtful.
I find it funny as to how how true the meme is, when you see the meme around April Fool's Day, where April 1st is the only day of the year where everybody scrutinizes everything they see on the internet a little bit harder, and looks for it to be, whether or not it's true, tries to decide whether or not it's truthful instead of taking it at face value.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. You're absolutely right, Chad. Somebody said, a long time ago that access to information was the reason that we had the lack of access to information was a lot of the cause of the problems, a lot of the problems we were seeing. Over the 30 years of the internet, 35, 40 years of the internet that we've had, I think we've proven that's not the case. We have infinite, we have more computing power in our pockets than the first space shuttle did that went to the moon, and we're still, having to tell people not to eat Tide Pods. So a couple of shout outs when it comes to like when it comes to the information on this particular subject. One of my favorite spots to go to, one of my favorite YouTubers who does an incredible amount of research and really does a fantastic job presenting it. She's a very big YouTuber. Her name is Stephanie Harlow. She's actually the one, Jamie, I don't know if you watched it, but when we went to Hinsdale last year, or 2 years ago, I guess now, she was the one that did the big 2-hour video on it that I shared with the group. And her research is fantastic. Her delivery, and she did an hour-long episode on the black-eyed children, and she goes into the various stories and the various theories. Also, the PBS. If you just Google black-eyed children, PBS did a special on it. If you're looking for a legitimate source, I mean, PBS make it a presentation on it. But then again, you have the History Channel, that's doing nothing but. yeah, that's kind of it from my end on this, and I enjoyed the discussion. Very offbeat, not our normal, ghosties and ghoulies type discussion.
Yeah. I really appreciate all the input from the comments. It's been great to have that feedback and
absolutely
discussion that way.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for another great topic. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Great. So
you're welcome. We I think that'll wrap that up. So
okay. So
there we go.
Looking at what's coming up. July Jott-Nyx paranormal upcoming events. July 8th and 22nd, we have public investigations at Booby's Brewery. The 17th, and I guess the 16th, there's something as well, Dave, right? Midway and then Crescent, July 16th and 17th.
Yeah, they're doing Midway. Yeah, they're doing Midway the day prior. Okay. I am not, but the rest of the crew that's going is.
Right. And then you're going to Crescent still? Is that the plan?
I'm going to Crescent, yeah.
Okay. Then after that, on July 29th, the team is going to White Hill Mansion. We're all looking forward to that. I know Jamie's looking forward to that.
Yeah, I love that place.
The Tuesday before White Hill Mansion on the 29th, the plan is for us to do a live broadcast with some information about White Hill Mansion and bring on somebody from White Hill and answer some of our questions. Give us some more, information closer to the source, you might say. So that's what's coming up for the team. Jamie, I think the plan is that you're going to do an episode on mediumship before that.
Yep. Yeah, we have a bit of a break here, guys, and I apologize for our regular viewers. The next episode is July 4th, so it's Independence Day. We're gonna take a holiday. We're gonna have a big cookout somewhere. And then Chad is on yet another vacation.
That's
the
not
16th
vacation
this year.
That's not
so far.
I'm volunteering at a camp where I'm cooking for about 100 people for a week. So
yeah. This is the 17th week of the year, and he's on his 16th vacation already. Whatever. And I'm going to be honest with everybody. Look, this doesn't happen without Chad. It really doesn't. And I appreciate you so very much. Dave, we talked about the content you bring every time is rock solid and fantastic. Chad makes us look pretty and as pretty as this can get. But he makes all of the rest.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
And that's why we can't do it without him. So we'll be back on the 18th of July for next live episode.
Then later in the summer, Labor Day weekend, I always get those messed up. Sorry about that. Labor Day weekend, we're going to be at the Red Mill Museum Village. Bunch of people there helping us investigate. We're going to, it's going to be a fun evening. I believe there's going to be a campfire where we can tell campfire stories. Bring that back into the mix. Tickets are available. Hit up our Facebook page to look for tickets. So that's going to be a fun evening. I'm looking forward to that. We're still working on Ghostly Truth. That will come out. We know it will. It's getting closer. Takes a lot of work to put one of those together, but we're looking forward to seeing that. Then, as usual, here are our social media links. So if you're interested, jump on any of those. Get information to us about topics you might want to hear, might want to see. If you want to join us for a topic, reach out. We'd be happy to do that as well. So we can send you a link so you can be on the screen with us and talk about something.
Sure.
I think that's about it for that. Anything else?
No.
So.
No.
Are we giving co-host credits to your guest there, Dave, earlier? Our furry friend again?
Yeah. You, Dr. Kitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen, Esquire, made a number of appearances tonight. It's his house. I'm just living in it.
You're just a guest, right? You're just there to pay for things.
Yep.
Yep.
He keeps, like, every time I yell at him, he just keeps looking at me, wondering why the can opener is yelling at him.
It can talk.
Well, on that note, if not, David, thanks for a great episode. It was really interesting. I appreciate it.
Hey guys, thanks as always. Thanks to our guests.
Yep, and tune in next time and see what we've got going on. All right.
Till then.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Everybody be good. Mahalo.